50 minutes?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Ask Steve Austin podcast. I am chatting today with my friend and frequent guest of the show, William Paul Young, author of The Shack, Crossroads, Eve, and Lies We Believe About God. So welcome back to the show, my friend, and thank you for spending some time with me today.
I love being with you, Steve. It's always an honor. Thank you.
Same here. So how are you? How are things? You just returned from some international travel, and what's new?
Australia, New Zealand, and which is more like, going to British Columbia in some ways. And
Yeah.
but great folk, great trip. We were there for the release of the Heart of Man movie.
Yeah.
So both in Australia and New Zealand. So it was about a 10-day trip. Fantastic. Got to see a lot of friends, especially in New Zealand. Met a lot of new friends, but the ripple effect of the film has already been felt. It's a different world. There's something that is beautiful going on in both Australia and New Zealand, and I noticed it. There is incredible creativity regarding the faith community. They're looking at sports, they're looking at business as a way to be present in the lives of people, because sports in Australia is sort of like the corporate religion. And but we were with one community that had established a training center that is a health fitness center, and even one of the world's strongest men works out there. And
oh, wow.
There's another community that is working with, they have a facility that is open to the community 24/7. They use part of the gym area for gatherings on Sunday. But other than that, there is a senior center care. There is training for class trainings and computers and all kinds of stuff. There's a medical interface. There is a restaurant there. I mean, it's all this community center
Wow.
that is open. Another group is looking for a way to help professional athletes navigate their careers, especially these young guys who are late teens, early 20s, who really, in many ways, don't have a clue, coming from difficult backgrounds. And so the National Rugby Association, and they're beginning to work with them.
That's fantastic.
To do holistic kinds of things. Yeah. Very, very different sense. No, let's build our own silo and point our guns at the other ones. It's not like that. So it was a great trip. It was a very helpful trip for me, as well as I got to participate in the holy ground of other people's stories. So that was pretty cool.
That's your favorite thing. I know.
Yeah, I love it. It is the kiss of grace. It's a part of all this, craziness.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, speaking a couple of weeks ago, and it's like I felt like I was just carrying Paul with me. Part of what we were talking about was talking about relationships and how we're made for relationships, and I could just hear you back there going, "Yep," harnessing my inner Paul.
Yep. As difficult as those things are, they are the crucible for transformation.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you I was with. I did a conference with Richard Rohr and Cynthia Boujot last year.
Wow.
And on the Trinity. And I was driving along with Richard, and he said, this might be strange coming from a celibate monk, Kansas City farm boy who didn't know he'd end up in the middle of what he is.
Yeah.
And he said, but after all these years, I've come to believe that the greatest gift that God has given humanity, one of them, is marriage. And he said, because you're put in a situation that is going to expose your stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy to just run away from it.
Yeah.
And it becomes a crucible for all kinds of potential exposure and change. It certainly was in my life, but
Oh yeah.
I see that as a common theme all over.
Absolutely. I look
You
at, Lindsay and I, it's only been 11 years, but I look at walking with her through postpartum depression and hospitalization, her
Mm-hmm.
walking with me through the suicide attempt and all of the garbage that was dug up after that. And yeah, but continuing
Yeah,
to choose each other every day in the midst of all that, not in spite of it, but because of it.
yeah,
That's some messy grace.
yeah. It is, and yet it's profound.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's work. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I always say marriage would be easier if there wasn't another person involved.
It's so true. Oh my goodness. I love
Yeah.
it. Well, hey, so we are talking about the Sermon on the Mount today as a part of this summer series. And when I emailed you, you chose Matthew 6:24 through 34. So I would love to know what version you're going to be reading from today and why you chose this section.
Ooh, so there is a theme that runs through my life that is pretty buried in this section of Matthew, and a couple different themes actually. But one of the biggest ones is that I think that we have an issue with trust. I have in my life. Trust has been probably the single most biggest movement in my life towards wholeness. That is learning how to trust. When you come from a background where sexual abuse was a part of it, and your relationship with your parents was not healthy, and so I had a abusive dad. You learn early that trust is dangerous. So when you deal with fear, because your childhood becomes a centerpiece for fear, you have a choice. You can either trust or you can control.
Mm,
And I think we are control freaks,
sure.
and we do it a lot of different ways. And especially if you're religious, you can find a way to mask it, make it sound okay. We can put worry under the category of being responsible, or
Mm.
some other
Oh, I'm
nobilizing
just
phrase.
concerned. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if I'm not worried about it, who's going to be? So this passage not only deals with the issue of trust, but it goes to one of the deepest places where we then derive our sense of certainty,
Mm,
and that's money. Um, that's wealth or accumulation or those kinds of things. Because in a world where um, you can't really trust God, it seems that money is a really good option. And
yeah.
uh, and a lot of us have built um, control around the issue of money, and this passage goes right to the heart of it. I talk about an 11-year journey of being exposed and working toward wholeness. But the issue of financial insecurity was one of the very last major obstacles that I had to deal with. It didn't arise in the series of things that needed to be addressed in my own soul. It didn't arise until way down. In fact, it was the 11th year. And that shows how deeply embedded uh, this whole thing is. I'll tell you that story because I think it's very appropriate, and it gives you a sense of how I had to make a different kind of a choice and where it led me. And that is at the beginning of 2004, which was the 11th year. And when you go through a healing journey, you don't know if it's going to be 2 or 3 eternities. It feels like it. And or it's going to be a year. I mean, the major pieces. I'm not talking about, oh, you come out perfect, because that's not going to happen. But where you dealt with the big, huge pieces that are underlying your addictions, or your need for secrets, or isolation, or the way you treat people, your inability to make coherent your inside world and your outside world. And that's a journey that is inward. And part of the beauty is that when you journey inward, you will find that God Father, Son, and Holy Spirit have been there the whole time. So in my sequence, this issue of financial insecurity shows up, and it shows up because over the course of our marriage and my life, and the habitual addiction to secrets, because of shame, you don't want to take the risk of somebody that will tell you that you're just stupid, because you already believe you're stupid. So you hide things, you justify things. How many times have I heard some guy say, well, I didn't want to tell my wife because I didn't want her to be worried, or concerned.
Absolutely.
So we have the audacity to take over someone else's spiritual journey, and but over those 11 years, we had moved out of that. I had moved out of secrets. Everything was on the table, but I had made decisions way back when, financial decisions on behalf of the family that were kind of sitting in the background. And in 2004, these things all showed up. And it wasn't that we hadn't been talking about it. We were. So at the beginning of the year, I'm looking at the year as a whole, and I'm going, okay. I mean, we've got telecom that has just blown up, in which I had some investments in. We had a history of being upside down in terms of our mortgage. We had, a lot of what we do, I think, is that when we're in a situation that begins to expose our fears, we begin to scramble.
Yeah.
And but at this point, I'm going through sequences of dealing with things in which I have to learn how to trust. And this one took me 5 days to realize that I was in the middle of it. And here's what I did. I decided to do a fast. You don't hear a lot of talk about fast these days. And I haven't done a lot of them, but I decided to, and fasting is it's not a hunger strike, right? It's not like, I'm not going to eat until God feels bad enough he's going to do something.
Right.
If he really loves me, he'll fix this. It's fasting is a way to clear the space. It's to get all the voices quieted. It's whatever. So I decided I had a couple issues that I really wanted to focus on. And one of them had to do with one of our sons, and it was resolved day 2 of this fast. And I didn't know how long it was going to be. I didn't say, well, I'm going to do a 5-day fast. So, and it was easy. It wasn't hard. But every day I'm coming in prayer in my conversation with God and just saying, look, how come I've trusted you my whole life with our finances, and we've been up and down and up and down and up and down? 5 days I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And it takes 5 days before, I've never heard God speak audibly, but I know the voice. Yeah. Here's what I wanted God to say. Oh man, I feel so bad for you. Let's go find some money. Yeah.
That's what we all want.
Yeah. I mean, because it's a quick fix, right?
Sure.
It's like, give me the needle. And it doesn't deal with the issue of trust. It doesn't deal with the issue of the choices that you made and the consequences that you have to deal with.
Right. And
that's what I wanted. And that's not what I heard. 5 days into this, I hear the voice on the inside, and it's a conversation, because that's, if you read my writing, you know that I write conversations, and it's, Paul, are you ready to listen to me? Well, why do you think I'm fasting?
I'm here, duh.
Yeah. What do you think I've been doing? No. Paul, you have never trusted me with your finances, let alone anything else. I mean, because I'd started every conversation, how come I've trusted you my whole life? And it's like, you've never trusted me your whole life with anything, So why are you saying that? So right off the bat, I'm caught in an absolute, what my friend Baxter Kruger would call self-referential incoherence, right? I have set myself up as the determiner of the frame of reference for which I understand something, and it turns out to be based on an absolute faulty view of how I'm seeing myself and something else.
Yeah.
So it's, Paul, you've never trusted me. And even that house you've lived in for 17 years now, that you tell people I gave you,
Mm.
I can't get my hands on it. Every time that I try, you will shade the truth, you will manipulate relationships, and you will lie to save your ass. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
And as soon as I hear it, it absolutely breaks me, you know. But it took me all of those 11 years to get to this point where I could hear that conversation. You know, I had dealt with all kinds of other levels of trust. And every time I ran into an issue of control, it was like, how do I let go of control?
Yeah.
How do I move toward trust? And now I'm facing what turns out to be one of the biggest ones. And it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Yeah.
How do I let go of trust in this situation? I mean, how do I let go of control and move toward trust? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And so I picked up the telephone. One of the things that had happened over the course of those 11 years is that there's a bunch of guys in my life now, and my abuse and things like that came almost exclusively from men, and so the issue of trust with men had been one of those layers that had to be worked through, and it had been. I had a dozen guys in my life at this point that I trusted, and so I called each of them up on the phone. I mean, this is that same morning as I'm having this confrontation, and when I heard the voice say that to me. I heard God say that to me. It broke me. I'm literally bawling, right? Because I know it's true. And it's like, you're right. You're so right. And so I call up each of the guys and I tell them, look, here's our financial situation. And I know you love my family. I know you care about me. And you're guys, you like to fix things. Now, 3 of those 12 guys could have turned around, opened their checkbook and knocked me out of my situation. No question, right? They had the capacity and they had the incentive. They had the love for us. And so I said to each of them, you know, here's our situation. I said, please, please, please don't rescue me from this, right? Don't do it. I said, I did give God a little window. I said, if he shows up as a burning bush or with an angel with a big flaming sword or something, fine.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't happen, if you rescue me, you'll probably be doing something that interferes with what God is trying to do right now in my life. And that was the beginning of 04. In the fall of 04, 7 of those guys took a day off from work, unbeknownst to me, and they showed up at the Clackamas County Courthouse in Oregon City to sit with me while the county auctioned off the house we'd lived in for 17 years.
Oh my goodness.
We lost the house, we lost the cars, we lost, and one of the guys gave us a car that had been in a wreck, and they helped us move to a little tiny place in the middle of 500 acres of Christmas trees. And we were there out on Wildcat Mountain Road. And we were there for a short period of time, but it was far enough out of town and we couldn't afford the gas money to get the 15 miles from that place to the train, because I needed to get to the train to go to work downtown Portland. One of my 3 jobs that, I was doing shipping and receiving. I was doing, I was cleaning toilets and hotel night, whatever I needed to do, food processing in a hotline. And so we moved into this little rental house on the corner of 12th Street in Gresham, because it was 150 feet away from the train station. And we were in town, we could walk most places. And as hard as that transition was, and it was not easy, we're talking a lifetime of being connected to the needle, the quick fix.
Mm-hmm.
And as hard as that transition was, suddenly joy dropped on us like a ton of bricks. I mean, and we had nothing. Yeah. And I'm working 3 jobs. Kim walks 2.5 blocks down the street, gets a job at the high school bakery. And we're in 900 square feet of usable space. 4 of the 6 kids are home. 2 are on college scholarships. And Kim starts bringing kids back from the high school and filling up all the cracks and spaces in our 900 square feet. and and joy becomes so tangible. Kim would tell you, my kids would tell you, that these 2.5 years that we spent there in that little house on the corner of 12th Street were some of the best years of our lives. And you know, if you have a fear of financial insecurity, losing everything is quite a significant way to address it.
Yeah. Yeah.
and you find out that the fear itself was what you were in bondage to.
Wow.
Right? And because how many of us, I call it future tripping, you know, how many of us have created imaginations of things that don't exist, that have drawn us out of the present
Absolutely.
and into something that's not even true.
Yeah. We live there a lot.
Yep. And Jesus is saying, look, sufficient to the day is the grace thereof. Tomorrow's got enough issues of its own. And so stay here. This is the day. You get grace for one day. You don't get today's grace for something that doesn't exist yet. Yeah. But in my future tripping imagination, I'd already been, many times have I already been penniless, poverty-stricken, homeless, living under a bridge in Portland, Oregon, you know?
Yeah.
How many times have I gotten the pink card, you know, the pink sheet? Or how many times, I mean, we even do this all the time with our relationships. How many times have I imagined a relationship or a conversation with someone? They're going to say this, then I'm going to say this.
Yep.
And we're going to be mad at each other. And so we're never going to talk to each other again. So I'm just not going to have the conversation.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right?
We do some major role playing.
Yeah. I've already controlled the whole situation. And so suddenly, you know, some months we had $17 in the bank, some we had $35 in the bank. But we learned that the opposite of more is enough. You know, it's not less. That's on the same scale. The true opposite of more is enough. And we had been surrounded by enough our whole lives and didn't know it because we were so locked into fear that at least we thought when we were worrying, we were doing something.
Yeah.
And, you know, trust is in the character of God. It's not in the outcomes. Trust is not that God will give you the money. If you've read Hebrews chapter 11, you know that by faith, some, you know, raised the dead and caused the armies to leave. But some by faith lived in caves and holes in the ground, were destitute, were tempted, were sawn in two. You know, and so this is not, we don't live according to outcomes. We live according to trust and according to presence. So the certainty is not the outcome. The certainty is the goodness of God, and that there is a God who actually loves us. So the issue of fear drives you to either trust or to control.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have a third option. There's just, that's it. And to the degree that fear has a place in your life, to that degree, you don't know how much you're loved yet. That's 1 John.
Yeah.
So this whole thing of staying inside the grace of the day, you know, just staying present with a God who lives inside today.
Yeah.
You know, in those future tripping imaginations in which, you know, your children experience death and mayhem and every disease, and in which you go to your own funeral, but you're the only one who cried, you know, I mean, this is craziness.
Oh, yeah.
But in those imaginations, you don't even look around and go like, wait, but God's here. You don't even do that, you know, and the reason that God's not in those imaginations is because they are not real.
Yeah.
The real is what's right in front of you. The real is this day. And so again, it's not about outcomes, it's about presence. And in the present, there's fullness of joy. And that's one of the things that surprised me in this journey. Suddenly, joy became a constant companion. And joy had never spent the night. You know, it's like, what? And I didn't look for it. I didn't have any sense of expectancy for it because it just wasn't in my frame of reference. The idea of constant joy and in the middle of really difficult times. Yeah. It was like, that's not even possible. But here joy comes and it wasn't because joy had been away. I had been away.
Yeah.
I had left the present in order to future trip some imagination, try to control the world so that things I was afraid of wouldn't happen,
Hmm.
rather than deal with what was right in front of me.
Yeah.
And in the mouth of Jesus, you have constantly this invitation to stay inside the presence, walk with me, abide with me, be with me. Today is the day. Hebrews, this is the day of salvation, the working out of what Jesus has already accomplished.
Yeah.
But you need to stay present to it, not run away into some imagination, to some, and we could add addiction, we could add psychosis, we could add all kinds of other things.
Yeah.
And but there is no fear in love.
That's right.
Perfect love casts out fear. The one who fears is not perfected in love. To the degree that fear has reign in your life, to that degree you don't know how much you're loved. That's 1 John. And a lot of what the writers of the New Testament did is that they went back to Jesus. And so when John is saying those things, he's pulling from the Sermon on the Mount. When Paul is writing some of the things that he did, he's pulling from the words of Jesus, because that's the incarnation of truth.
Yeah.
That's the person who is truth. Yep.
Yeah.
So let me read you this story, right? This section.
Bring it on.
And all right, it's New American Standard. No one can serve two masters. You either hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money.
Clear as can be.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, if you end up serving money, you will create institutions and you will make money the driving force that keeps those systems alive.
And I think it's interesting to look at.
You could call it tithing, actually. But let's not even go there.
I think it's interesting to look at. Money can control you on either end of the spectrum. You're not having it and the fear of not having it, or you're having it and never having enough. It can be your
or the envy. Yes, you can be as materialistic, having nothing, as someone who is totally consumed by having materialism.
Yeah.
The ones who have it now become afraid of losing it.
Yeah.
And they're still as focused on it as they ever were.
The love of money can impact you either way, rich or poor.
The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a false certainty. And that's why people worry about it all the time. And so many of our addictive anxiety and worry, all of that is centered on money. It's centered on finances. It's centered on the paycheck. It's centered, and it's not centered on the sense of the presence of a God who wraps me with continuous affection, who is relentless in that affection, who's involved in the details of my life, right?
Yeah.
And so part of this is that we have to grow up and become a child. We have to grow up and start letting go of the control that adults love to have, because they think that they can manage life. You know what? That kind of certainty, control, is an absolute myth. You do not know if by tomorrow some cell in your brain won't go sideways and it's all she wrote.
That's right.
And how much worry have you spent with regard to finances or anything else? How much anxiety and fretting and centering your mind on those things associated with money? How much of that will you have spent? And it was for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Control
missing out on today.
Yeah. This is the real world. This is the day, right?
Yeah.
So you can't serve God and money. And this is, and the language of this is not slavery language, but let's start there. That's what Jesus is saying, if you're going to put God in a position of someone to be a master in that sense, your choice is this: a God who's actually good, or money that doesn't give a damn about you.
Yeah.
And it's like you're going to serve one or you're going to serve the other. You're going to trust the one or you're going to trust the other. And so look at the option here. Not so good,
Yeah.
right? So for this reason, that you cannot serve God in money, for this reason I say to you, don't be worried about your life. Don't be worried. See, worry is not a fruit of the Spirit. It's just not.
It's not
but
there.
but a lot of people think that when they're worried, they're being responsible.
Yeah.
But the problem is the word responsible is not even a biblical word. I mean, we created it out of the Industrial Revolution. So it never, you won't find a Greek word for responsible. You won't find a Hebrew word for responsible, and you won't find an Aramaic word for responsible. It'll show up sometimes in the English, but that's because we put it in there. It's not because it actually, I've got back here somewhere in my office here, I've got Kittle's 10-volume set of New Testament Greek words. And each one is like, 600 to 1200 pages long of fine print,
Wow.
And if you go to the index in book 10 and you look up all the English words that have Greek equivalents, you won't find the word responsible in there. And yet it has become the centerpiece. It came from a Latin and French derivative, the ability to respond, which is a verbal form. So there's a huge difference between I have an ability to respond, that is something that comes from the inside out, versus a responsibility that comes from the outside in. Now it's a law. Now you've got a set of expectations you can disappoint. Your responsibility as a man, your responsibility as a worker, your responsibility as a husband, your responsibility as a father, and all of these build up layers and layers of performance expectations. And they will bury you, right?
Almost did.
Yep. So responsibility is no solution here. Jesus never did anything because he felt responsible. He did everything because he had an ability to respond. I don't say anything unless I hear the Father say it. I don't do anything unless I see the Father do it. So he lived a lifestyle of response. And that was inside the grace of the day. And so he could be in a conversation and he's got this internal dialogue with his relationship with the Father and the Holy Spirit going on all the time. So his mom could say, do something. We're at this wedding, do something. And he goes, woman, and you can see the twinkle in his eye. My time has not yet come. What do I have to do with this? And why would he say that? Well, it's because I don't say anything unless I hear the Father say it. So in his internal dialogue with the Father, she says, be responsible. We have friends who are going to feel like fools, and you're kind of God, right? You're like 30 years old, haven't even gone to college, and you hang around with these bunch of guys and do something. It's kind of like 30 years of frustration coming out in one scene. And Jesus goes, my time hasn't come. Why? Because the Father says, your time hasn't come, right? And he says, just because she demands something doesn't mean he's responsible to fulfill it.
Wow.
And it's why? Because he lives in a moment by moment relational reality with the Father. But what does she do? She goes, Jewish mom she is, right? Whatever. Hey, you guys. Whatever he tells you to do, do it. And Jesus does it. And you go like, what just happened?
Right.
Well, what happened was 30 seconds later, Father God says, now your time's come. When she has invited a community to participate, and those servants' lives will never be the same. They will tell this story of how they helped Jesus change water into wine to their kids and their grandkids. Forever. But in his moment by moment ability to respond, he wasn't doing it to submit to her, because if Papa had still said, your time hasn't come, he wouldn't have done it. But in 30 seconds, because he has an ability to respond, he makes a different choice. Because now your time's come. Now, because look, there's a whole different thing going on. The world has changed in 30 seconds. So now your time's come. That's an ability to respond. Isn't that? Isn't that? That
relationship
is so cool.
again.
Yeah. So which means that staying in the presence becomes absolutely necessary to express an ability to respond. Otherwise, you're going to use responsibility as a way to cover up your capacity to worry, right? You're going to hide worry, fretting, anxiety inside of language that prevents you from seeing the audacity of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And responsibility is probably one of the single biggest words.
I mean, I just look at it in my own life, and such a, I am a pretty ambitious guy. And when I'm not healthy, um, when I'm not connected to my true self, when I'm not listening to that voice inside, I think most people think of me as an open book these days. But when I'm not healthy, yeah, I'll tell you everything that I want you to know. But yeah, when I'm not healthy, I'm controlling. I'm only letting you in where I want you in.
You have an
And
agenda, right?
yeah,
You don't have a relationship, you have an agenda.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It goes back to the trust thing we're talking about earlier, and how all of this is so tied together. Oh my goodness.
So what's the motivator for your ambition? Is it worry? Is it
Right.
is it a sucking need to be significant?
Right.
Is it, is it all of these elements that are not real?
Yeah.
Is it identity, worth, value, significance, security, meaning, purpose, destiny, community, love? Are those the motivators for ambition? If they are, then you're gonna taste it at the end of the day when you've manipulated people even to try to get the work of God done.
Right.
How many of us have done that,
Oh,
right?
sure.
That,
Absolutely.
that, that we're constantly saying to God, hey, come follow me. I got this great vision for me,
Yeah.
for actually this.
Right. Yeah.
And we mask over the ambition of religious performance in order to get a sense of certainty. And I mean, the implications of this we could talk a lot about, but how many times have we been presented as an institutional system, of religious system, Christian system, that it's not Jesus that is the one who is expressing himself in our midst. It's the necessity of money. We've got to get the money in order to continue to do the work of God.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we've now covered over our addiction to money and wrapped it in beautiful religious language and purpose language and ministry language in order to cover up the fact that no, if we don't get the people to give their money, then we won't be able to pay our mortgage.
Yeah.
And so we're back to the same thing. We're back to a system in which our trust is in the money.
Yeah.
And we follow the money rather than follow Jesus.
Boy, oh boy.
So don't be worried about your life as to what you're going to eat or drink, or nor for your body as to what you're going to put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? That's a high view of humanity right there.
Yeah.
Right? It's not the attachments, it's not the accoutrements, it's not the bigness of our institutional success. It's not any, and life. And when he says life, he's not talking about just your physical life. He's talking about life, period.
Yeah.
Money is dead. If anything, it's, I think Ravi Zacharias calls it congealed life. You've exchanged time. You've exchanged your life for this coin that then can be traded for some commodity,
Wow.
And so, but is not your life itself something that is living? Is not your body more than the clothes you put on it? Right? This is not covering up or hiding. This is talking about the value of what it means to be human. And look at the birds of the air. They don't sow, they don't reap, they don't gather into barns, and yet Papa feeds them.
Yeah.
Right?
You are worth more than many sparrows. Oh.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
beautiful.
Are you not worth more than they?
Yeah.
And the truth is, you are. Humanity, God didn't become a bird. The incarnation is not to be a bird.
Wow.
God doesn't become anything that is not good.
He became us. Oh my goodness.
He becomes human. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And why are you worried? Go back. And who of you, by being worried, can add a single hour to his life?
Yeah.
That is exposing the audacity of future tripping imagination, right?
Yep.
That is saying you're creating imaginations in which you think money is going to be your solution,
Mhm.
you know, and it's not.
Yeah.
That's an imagination that raises itself up against the knowing of God.
Yep. That's what we got to cast down. Wow.
Take captive every empty imagination that raises itself up against the knowing of God.
Mhm.
So who do you know God to be? God is good. God is
Yeah.
involved in the details of my life.
Mhm.
God likes me, right?
Yeah.
God is for me.
Yeah.
Any imagination that raises itself up against that, I take captive and I just say, no,
Yeah.
no, I am not going to be a future tripper. I'm not going to go spinning my wheels into, outcome oriented agenda,
Yeah.
right?
Gonna be
I'm going to,
here.
I'm going to be here. I'm going to deal with what's right in front of me, as difficult as it is. I'm not
Yeah.
going to run away from it. I'm going to turn my face into it, as wonderful as it is. I'm going to be here and enjoy it, not thinking about, but tomorrow,
Mm. Yeah.
I'm going to be back in the grind. I'm going to be,
Yeah.
and it's going to be worthless. And then, or we traumatize even our imagination of the future by the difficulties that we are facing now, right?
Yeah. True.
The
Yeah.
way
Very true.
the future is going to be always this dark,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
And,
yeah.
and then we go live there.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
the blog I shared today on my site was all about walking through postpartum depression with Lindsay and the living hell that was, and how scary and how unpredictable. And it was our first baby, and we're these 25-year-old kids and don't know what. And nobody tells
Yeah.
you about this kind of thing in marriage premarital counseling with your pastor. Nobody tells you this stuff is possible, and her having to go back to the hospital, be readmitted. She stayed on the labor and delivery floor for a week. Then she's transferred to the psych ward for another week. And all of this worry and all of this future tripping said, it's always going to be this way. It's never
Yep.
going to get better, and it took her friend driving from Indiana to Alabama through the night to sit with us and say, go home to me, go home, go to bed. I can hold her hand just like you can. You've got to get some rest. You've got to be here. You don't have to do all of this and control all of it. She's got
Yeah.
doctors, nurses, social
Yeah.
workers, they're all doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And you've just got to breathe. You've got to be here for this baby. You've got to trust that God is present in this darkness, in this hell with
Yeah.
you right now. And that's a hard thing when you're in the middle of the darkness, to not try to jump fast forward, and skip over it, but to do the film shows in the heart of man, that
Yeah.
Jesus is right there waiting on us,
Yeah.
just waiting for an invitation. Boy.
Well, and the invitation is not the invitation for presence. It's the presence is there.
Yeah.
The invitation is to stay with me,
Yeah.
to abide, to stay here.
Yeah.
When you deal with fear, who's the solution?
Yeah.
Right? If you get lost in fear, all of a sudden you're the solution. You've got to figure your way out of this, and that's what worry and fretting is, and anxiety-based lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Is that, and the more variables, the greater amount of pressure you feel, and all of it is going to drive you out of being present, out of being staying inside the grace of just one day.
That's right.
Sufficient to the day is the grace thereof. Take no thought for tomorrow. Tomorrow's got enough issues of its own, which is in this passage, right? So it says, so why are you worried about clothing? Observe the lilies of the field. They grow, they don't toil. They're not spinning, which is one of my favorite terms for how we, as soon as we start to freak out, we start to spin everything,
Yeah.
And why are you worried about clothing? Okay. And I say to you that not even Solomon in all of his glory was clothed like one of these lilies. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? And that's not a value statement. That is an observation.
Yeah.
And he's saying, look, when money is the one you serve, you are of little faith. You don't see the reality of a God who really is good all the time and who's involved in the details of your life. Do not worry then, saying, what are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? What are we going to wear for clothing? See, all of those are future tripping. All of them are future tense.
Yeah.
Right? They're not about today.
Right.
They're about like, this is, what are we going to do? And for the Gentiles, and it's just talking about those, it's kind of a slight saying, if you're seeking these things, you're a Gentile, and but it's all those who don't know how to stay inside the grace of the day. They eagerly seek these things, for your heavenly Father knows that you need them, but seek first the kingdom and his righteousness. Righteousness is right relationship with you, right? And all these things, they're going to be added to you. So don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And that's how that passage ends. Don't worry about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Don't be a future tripper.
Yeah.
And this really does change everything. It's simple. It's simple. What's complicated? Worry.
Yeah.
Worry is complicated.
Yeah.
Fear is complicated.
Feeding into all of those what ifs.
Well, how many iterations of the potential, catastrophic future do we have? How many iterations do we have?
Yeah.
As many as we can think up.
Absolutely.
And each of them, gets the fight or flight response going, gets our anxiety raised, gets us not able to deal with the person in front of us in any kind of loving way, because they're either an impediment for us solving our problem, or they're one of the reasons we have the problem that we've imagined.
Yeah.
And it just spills out. I mean, this is just catastrophically a lose-lose situation if you're a future tripper. Mm-hmm. And we don't let go of that easily, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Because I had somebody who was asking me about this yesterday, day before yesterday, and they go like, so how am I going to do this? And I'm going like, well, you're future tripping right now.
Oh,
right. That's how subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's like, and he says, so what do I do? I said, learn to laugh at yourself. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it again. This is, but a lot of us who grew up in a very punitive, retributive religious system, we don't laugh at ourselves. We don't know how to laugh with ourselves. We just, anything that laughs at us is humiliation and shame, No, we got to learn to laugh about this stuff. It's like, no, you're not catching God by surprise. He's not like, oh, now he's going to do it perfect. Oh, that's God's like, no. It's going to take him. Let's see, tomorrow it'll take him only 2,500 times before he finally figures out he's future tripping, but the next day it'll be 2,470 times.
Yeah.
And then this over time becomes a lifestyle, not perfect. I can still get triggered and I end up off somewhere, and not here. And it's like, oh, there I go again.
Yeah.
And it seems so audacious. Oh, this is emotional for me. It seems so audacious that I'm allowed to be the child. It seems so irresponsible, and the beauty is that freedom will always feel irresponsible, and especially if you've carried the weight of the world on your shoulders, which is a nice way to say, oh, it's really up to you to be the provider, the protector, the one who solves all the problems, that, is the strong one, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And it's not true.
No, I tell people all the time, they thought for years that I was this guy who was on top of the world, and they had no idea that it felt like the world was on top of me because of that control, because of that I've got to present, this sin of comparison thing that we face so much, especially in social media. Yeah. When I'm comparing what I know about me to what I don't know about you, and I'm looking at all the pictures of your new house or your new dog or your new baby, and everything looks so great, but I don't know. And so I'm trying to compare and live up to this. Oh, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. And if you're looking for an accuser, you will always find, 20 for every one you thought was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, no, this is not the way to live life. This is life abundant, to be all caught up in worry and fret.
Right.
And so when Jesus goes after this peace, he's not going after it to humiliate anybody.
Hmm.
He's going after something that is so rooted in our inability to trust, that it is a centerpiece of how addicted we are, to the weight of responsibility, and so much so that rather than say, oh my gosh, what a mess I've made, rather than say that, we'll find religious language to make it look pretty.
You got it right.
We'll put chocolate on the piece of crap. And
so true. Dress this up. Look. Yeah.
Look, I'm being responsible.
Yeah.
And some folks out there would be going like, so you don't have to be responsible. And I'm going like, no, you don't.
Mm.
This is not about a set of expectations, a law that lives outside of yourself that dictates to you your value.
Yeah.
You have an ability to respond. Why? Because you're in Christ. The Holy Spirit lives in you. But I didn't say the magic words.
Yeah.
That's all right. This is, you've been included. If you read Ephesians 1, read Colossians 1, you've been always included. Now it's about whether you want to step in. The invitation is the stepping into that relationship of trust. Like, all right. But God goes like, yeah, you're not going to do very good at this, but I'm not leaving. I don't do abandonment. I don't do expectations. I don't do disappointment. I do love, and there's no fear in love, period. No fear in love, period. And
we always cry. Why do we always cry? I cry with you every time.
Because that's how the heart leaks,
Oh.
Like Octavia Spencer at the Shack says in the movies, he says, sometimes it's good to let the healing waters flow.
Oh, man. Talking about her and thinking about the Shack, I think that's one reason that papas laugh in the movie and in the book. I think it's why it's so important.
Yeah.
So good. So good. I'm so grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you. So it is such a precious thing to be able to look and say, there's a coherence to my life. All that performance orientation, all that push to be responsible that just buried me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It didn't heal anything. It didn't, all you had is a whole new set of all those expectations, and so you could run away from one and then you start over again and create a whole bunch of them. And there is a simplicity to this that works for children. It's the way they are. There's a simplicity for this that would work for a first century slave. Oh
yeah.
And if it doesn't work for first century slaves and children, it's probably not true.
It's true. I look at the way my kids, they trust me. They would follow me. Unfortunately, they'd follow me right off the cliff. They'd follow me right into the fire. They would follow me anywhere.
Why?
Because they know I love them.
That's it.
They never fear that I would harm them.
Yep. That's exactly right. And that's the journey that we're on, is to trust the love of the Father for us.
Yeah. To grow up and become children.
Yeah. Being an adult's too much work anyway.
You're right. We take ourselves way too serious.
Yeah. And then we're in competition with everybody else for the same meager space, or the coin or whatever.
Yeah. There's something about figuring out when we begin to learn that we belong.
Yeah.
Exactly as we are.
So in a lot of our language, you add the word today, right? So we're not you can make statements about your life, but if you add the word today, that says, all right, I'm back here to the present. I'm not in some future tripping imagination.
Yeah.
So, so our marriage, you could say in a particular situation, my marriage is not doing well
today.
Today.
Oh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that brings you back to today, rather than my marriage is not doing well, and suddenly I'm spinning out and looking at a
Yeah,
future in which it will never do well. In fact,
absolutely.
it will begin to, that imagination will begin to accuse me of all of my failures
Mm.
and drive me back towards shame, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and you can do that in the positive and the negative. Just you just add the word today to so much of what we say, and it's like, all right, that brings me right back to what's in front of me.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go future tripping into some imagination
yeah.
that absolutely accuses me because of my inability to be the savior or the fixer or the
Yeah.
healer, and which I'm not.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
don't have to be that. There's already one.
you can't. You can only imagine yourself being one.
Yeah.
You're not the savior. You're not.
Yeah.
You're not the healer. But you get to participate.
That's
That's the
right.
beautiful thing. But you do it inside the grace of the day.
Just
You
here,
can't. You
just
can't.
now.
You can't heal anybody in your imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you for this.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I am going to give away a copy of Lies We Believe About God.
Sweet.
Why not? Yeah. So, friends, when this episode goes live on Sunday, if you will go to my Twitter account, so go to twitter.com/IamSteveAustin and retweet the pinned post at the top of the page. There will be a link to this episode, and you will be entered into a chance to win a copy of Paul's book, Lies We Believe About God, which is just fantastic, a game changer, first nonfiction book for Paul, and just wonderful. So do that, and thank you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Absolutely honored as always. I'm so appreciate you. Love you.
Love you too. All right.